Calabasas, California, spring 1937. The banquet room at the MGM ranch smells like cigarette smoke and spilled rye. The walls are wood-paneled, dark enough to swallow the light from the hanging fixtures. Sales managers from across the country crowd the long tables, jackets off, ties loosened, voices too loud. Laughter ricochets off the beams. Someone pounds a glass with a fork. Along the far wall, a line of hired dancers stands in identical satin dresses. Their smiles are fixed, their hands are clasped in front of them. At the center table, a drunken MGM salesman rises too fast from his chair, knocking it back. He sways, lifts his glass, and grins at the room like he owns it. Here to Metro, he slurs, dragging the word out, and all the perks that come with it. The men roar. He turns, gesturing lazily toward the line of girls, especially these. More laughter, louder now, the kind that spills into coughing. For a few seconds it feels like any other Hollywood party, crude, boastful, safe. Until it is. At the head of the table sits Eddie Mannix. He doesn't smile. He doesn't laugh. He doesn't move. The laughter thins first at his end of the room. A few men notice. One clears his throat. Another lowers his glass before finishing the sip. The salesman's grin wavers. He looks toward Mannix, expecting approval. Mannix simply looks back. It isn't a glare, it isn't anger. It's calculation. And in 1937, at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, calculation was more dangerous than rage. The room grows quieter by degrees, not instantly, gradually, like someone turning down a dial. The salesman shifts his weight. Just having a little fun, he mutters, forcing a chuckle. No one answers. The girls against the wall stop smiling. One of them, dark hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, lowers her eyes for a second too long. Her name is Patricia Douglas. She is 20 years old. She has been hired tonight as atmosphere. That is the word on the paperwork. Atmosphere. She doesn't know yet that this room, this toast, this silence will follow her for the rest of her life. Mannix finally lifts his glass, not high, just enough. To a successful year, he says evenly. His voice is calm, controlled, not drunk. The room exhales in relief. Men drink, chairs scrape. Someone starts a new conversation too loudly, eager to move past the moment. But something has shifted. Because everyone in that room understands one thing about Eddie Mannix. He is the fixer. Officially, he is a vice president at MGM, a man who oversees production schedules and budgets. Unofficially, he is the one who makes problems vanish. Scandals, arrests, pregnancies, affairs, headlines. He doesn't threaten. He arranges. He doesn't shout. He corrects. And if a correction requires silence, that silence will be absolute. The party continues. Music starts again. A gramophone in the corner crackles to life. Salesmen approach the line of dancers one by one, emboldened by alcohol and approval. The toast lingers in the air. Perks. The word reshapes the room. Patricia feels it first as a shift in posture. The men no longer see performers, they see entitlement. One of the salesmen, the same man who made the toast, approaches her later in the evening. His name is David Ross, a Chicago salesman flown in for the convention. His face is flushed, his smile too wide. He offers her another drink. She declines. He insists. His hand lingers on her wrist half a second too long. Across the room, executives watch, not carefully, not protectively. Just watchful. The ranch is isolated, nearly 20 miles from Central Los Angeles. The party is private, the guest list controlled, reporters are nowhere near the gates. Patricia tries to stay near the other girls, but the evening stretches, the men grow bolder. At some point, Ross leans in and says something only she can hear. She shakes her head. He laughs. It is still technically a party. And yet the air feels heavier, charged, like a storm that hasn't broken. Near midnight, Patricia steps outside for air. The California night is cool, almost quiet compared to the noise inside. Gravel crunches under her heels. Ross follows. There are no witnesses here. No gramophone. No applause. What happens next will later be described in court filings, in affidavits, in testimony. But in this moment, there are only two people in the dark. Inside, the banquet resumes its rhythm, glasses clink, a joke lands, someone sings a few bars of a Broadway tune off-key. At the head table, Eddie Mannix speaks quietly with another executive. His expression never changes. He does not ask where the girls have gone. He does not need to. Because in rooms like this, absence is rarely accidental. By the time Patricia returns, shaken, disheveled, pale, the party is winding down. Some of the other dancers notice. One asks if she's all right. She nods automatically. She is not all right. Ross re-enters separately, smoothing his jacket, adjusting his tie. No one confronts him. No one needs to. The silence that followed the toast has expanded. It now covers more than a joke, it covers an act. Before the night ends, word reaches the right ears, quietly, efficiently. A complaint is possible. A lawsuit is possible. A headline is possible. And that is unacceptable. The next morning, before Patricia can fully process what has happened, before she can decide who to tell, the machinery of MGM begins to move. Phone calls are made. Statements are drafted. Memories are adjusted. Because Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer in 1937 is not just a studio. It is a system. And systems do not panic. They protect themselves. Patricia will attempt to press charges. She will attempt to tell the truth. But she has underestimated something far more intimidating than one drunken salesman. She has underestimated the power of a room that learned, in a single silent glance from Eddie Mannix, exactly what must never leave its walls. And by the time she realizes it, the laughter from that toast will feel like the least dangerous sound she heard that night. The morning after the party, Patricia Douglas wakes up with the smell of smoke still in her hair. The ranch is quiet now, sunlight replaces the haze. The previous night feels distant, almost unreal, except for the bruises forming along her arm where fingers pressed too hard. She reports what happened. Not to a reporter, not yet. First, she tells people within the system. That is her first mistake. MGM does not respond with anger, it responds with efficiency. Within hours, studio representatives begin shaping the narrative. David Ross, the salesman from Chicago, is described as overenthusiastic. The party is framed as harmless entertainment. Alcohol is mentioned repeatedly. Patricia's name is not mentioned at all. Instead of outrage, she encounters something colder, dismissal dressed as concern. A studio representative suggests she may have misinterpreted the situation. Another asks if she had been drinking. A third reminds her how competitive the industry is for young dancers. The implication hangs in the air. Careers are fragile. Reputations are fragile. Studios are not. When Patricia insists on filing a criminal complaint against Ross, MGM shifts gears. This is no longer internal. This is now a potential public problem. And MGM does not tolerate public problems. Eddie Mannix enters the background of the story again, not loudly, not visibly, but decisively. Mannix's role at MGM is not ceremonial. He has already handled scandals involving stars whose names fill marquees, arrests quietly erased, paternity disputes buried, newspaper editors persuaded to run alternative angles. He understands something about Lowe's Angels in 1937. Perception is reality. If the public believes nothing happened, nothing happened. When Patricia files her complaint, the studio's legal apparatus moves quickly. Lawyers appear, statements are issued. David Ross retains counsel with suspicious speed for a traveling salesman. Meanwhile, reporters receive subtle nudges. MGM is one of the most powerful studios in Hollywood. It controls stars, contracts, and advertising dollars. Newspapers rely on access, film magazines rely on exclusives, theater chains rely on distribution. Access can be revoked. Invitations can stop. Careers can cool. The press begins to frame the story differently. Not as assault. As misunderstanding. Some reports imply Patricia was intoxicated. Others suggest she willingly accompanied Ross outside. The word rape appears sparingly, often in quotation marks. The tone shifts from sympathy to skepticism. And it happens quietly. Patricia notices it first in the way people look at her when she walks into meetings, not openly hostile, just cautious, curious. As if she has done something inconvenient. She is 20 years old. MGM is a corporation valued in the millions. The imbalance is obvious to everyone except her, at least at first. The district attorney reviews the complaint, Ross is charged, the case proceeds. And that is when the real pressure begins. Witnesses from the party begin revising their recollections. Sales managers who were present claim they saw nothing unusual. Some insist Patricia appeared cheerful throughout the evening, others claim she flirted. The line of dancers grows quieter, one by one they become harder to reach. A few privately express sympathy, none agree to testify in a way that challenges the studio narrative. Because they understand something Patricia is only beginning to grasp. MGM is not simply defending Ross. It is defending itself. If the public accepts that a studio-sponsored event enabled assault, then every future event carries risk. Every party, every casting call, every private meeting. So the focus shifts from what Ross did to who Patricia is. Defense attorneys question her character, her background, her employment history. They dissect her movements that night minute by minute. Why did she step outside? Why did she not scream? Why did she return inside? Why did she continue working? Each question carries the same underlying message: you are the anomaly, not the system. Behind the scenes, there are attempts at settlement. Settle it first. A suggestion that perhaps this could be resolved privately, a financial offer, an agreement not to pursue further action. Patricia refuses. She wants acknowledgement. That is more dangerous than money. Because acknowledgement creates precedent. Eddie Mannix does not appear in court as a central figure. He does not need to. His influence operates indirectly, through attorneys, through studio executives, through relationships cultivated over years. The trial begins. In the courtroom, the atmosphere is different from the ranch banquet hall, brighter, formal, public. But the tension is familiar. Ross testifies that the encounter was consensual. He describes Patricia as willing, flirtatious. He smiles when appropriate. He speaks clearly. He looks nothing like a villain. Patricia testifies next. Her voice is steady at first, then it shakes. She describes the gravel under her shoes, the pressure on her wrists, the way the night air felt suddenly smaller. Defense attorneys interrupt, object reframe. They highlight inconsistencies, minor details. The jury listens. The press writes. But outside the courtroom, something more powerful is happening. MGM's public relations machine works to distance the studio from responsibility. Ross is portrayed as an independent contractor, a guest, not a representative of corporate policy. The party is reframed as a sales gathering that got out of hand. The word perks disappears from coverage. So does the toast. In its place, ambiguity. The longer the trial continues, the more Patricia feels isolated. Friends stop calling. Potential employers hesitate. Auditions dry up. No official memo bans her from work. It simply becomes difficult. She has become associated with scandal. And in 1937 Hollywood, scandal is contagious. The jury ultimately acquits David Ross. Not because nothing happened, but because doubt has been successfully introduced. After the verdict, reporters gather outside, flashbulbs pop, questions fly. Ross leaves quickly, shielded. Patricia stands alone for a moment. She has told the truth publicly. And it has changed nothing. Or worse, it has changed her. Inside MGM offices there is no celebration, just relief. The problem has been contained. But containment requires one final step. Erasure. Patricia soon discovers she is effectively blacklisted. Calls go unanswered, contracts evaporate, casting agents avoid eye contact. There is no official announcement. No letter. Just silence. The same silence that began with a toast. She begins to understand that the most powerful weapon in Hollywood is not violence. It is invisibility. And the man who mastered that weapon is still sitting behind a desk at MGM, reviewing production schedules, signing memos, ensuring that the studio's image remains polished and untouchable. Eddie Mannix never publicly threatens her. He doesn't need to. Because by now, everyone understands what happens to those who force the room to go silent. And Patricia Douglas is about to learn that losing in court was only the beginning. After the acquittal, there is no dramatic collapse. No public apology. No studio memo acknowledging the damage. Just quiet. Patricia Douglas returns to Los Angeles and waits for the phone to ring. It doesn't. Weeks pass. Then months. In Hollywood, momentum is everything. A young dancer survives on momentum, auditions, introductions, referrals whispered between agents, but Patricia's name has acquired weight, not admiration, not sympathy. Wait. Producers hesitate. Casting directors glance at her resume and recognize it from headlines, not the kind that sell tickets. She tries smaller studios. She tries stage work. Doors open just long enough for someone to remember. Then they close. No one says the words blacklist. No one needs to. It is understood. MGM never issues a public condemnation of her. They never need to defend themselves aggressively again. The verdict did that. The jury's doubt has been repurposed into a shield. In private, industry men refer to the case as that unfortunate business. Some call it a misunderstanding. Others roll their eyes and say she should have let it go. Let it go. As if it were a bad audition. As if it were a joke that went too far. But Patricia begins to realize something deeper. The toast that night was not just crude humor. It was a declaration of hierarchy. When the salesman raised his glass and called the dancers perks, he wasn't inventing the culture in that room. He was exposing it. And when Eddie Mannix didn't laugh, the room understood that the joke had crossed from celebration into liability. Not moral liability. Corporate liability. That was the line. The silence that followed was not about decency. It was about containment. In the years after the trial, Patricia drifts away from Hollywood, not dramatically. Gradually, she marries, she works outside the studio system, she rarely speaks publicly about what happened. Meanwhile, MGM thrives. The late 1930s become its golden era. The Wizard of Oz, Gone with the Wind. Glamour spreads across screens worldwide. Studio publicity departments refine the illusion of elegance and safety. Audiences see polished musicals and romantic dramas. They do not see Calabasas ranch parties. They do not see lawyers adjusting statements. They do not see a 20-year-old woman realizing that telling the truth can cost more than staying silent. Eddie Mannix remains at MGM for decades. He handles other crises, some documented, many not. Actors arrested for drunken driving, stars caught in affairs, stories buried before they bloom. His reputation solidifies, the man who keeps the studio clean. Not morally clean. Visually clean. In interviews years later, former employees describe him as calm, strategic, devoted to the studio. They rarely mention Patricia Douglas. Because she is not part of the legend. She is part of the shadow. The most unsettling part of her story is not the assault itself. It is the aftermath. Because the aftermath reveals how power behaves when challenged. There was no public attack on her character orchestrated by a screaming executive, no televised smear campaign, no overt threats. Instead, there was something colder. Access removed. Opportunities evaporated. Memory adjusted. The studio did not need to destroy her loudly. It only needed to outlast her. And institutions always outlast individuals. Decades pass. Hollywood changes on the surface. The studio system weakens, contracts dissolve, independent productions rise, public scandals become harder to contain. But the mechanism remains familiar. Protect the brand. Isolate the accuser. Shift the narrative. By the time Patricia speaks more openly about her experience later in life, many of the men involved are dead. The ranch party feels like ancient history to the industry. But not to her. Because she remembers the micro details. The weight of Ross's hand. the gravel under her shoes. And the moment the room went silent after that toast, that silence becomes the anchor of the story. Not the crime, not the verdict, the silence, because it reveals complicity without words. When Eddie Mannix lifted his glass and calmly redirected the room to a successful year, he wasn't just changing the subject. He was signaling the boundary. What happens here stays here. And if it doesn't, the consequences will not be dramatic. They will be procedural. Careers will thin. Phones will stop ringing. History will move forward without you. Patricia's case did not bring down MGM. It did not reform Hollywood in 1937. It did not even secure a conviction. But it exposed something quieter and more enduring than a single crime. It exposed how power reacts to embarrassment. Not with rage, with erasure. In the end, there was no official order to remove her from the industry. No document signed by Eddie Mannix declaring her untouchable. There didn't need to be. Because in Hollywood, the most effective commands are rarely written. They are understood. And once understood, they ripple outward through agents, producers, reporters, and executives until the person at the center finds herself alone. The ranch still stands today. The banquet room no longer smells of cigarette smoke. The gramophone is gone. But if you imagine that moment, the raised glass, the crude joke, the laughter rolling across the tables, you can almost hear the shift. The instant when one man didn't laugh. When the noise thinned. When everyone recalibrated. That was the real decision point. Not the verdict. Not the lawsuit. The silence. Because from that silence came a message that echoed for decades. The studio will survive. You might not. And in old Hollywood, that difference meant everything. The toast was a joke. Until it was. Then the room went silent. And a girl disappeared from the only world she had come to conquer. No one needed to say another word. The system had already spoken.